What's up, Barnhill family?
Yo, yo, yo.
Welcome to another episode of the Barnhill Brothers Show.
Yes, we're welcoming you back into our lives on a fresh week. And guess what? It's fight week.
Ooh, and it's a good one, guys. It is a good fight week this week. So let's dive right into it.
Yeah.
It is officially the week of a Conor McGregor fight, and I just watched the first Embedded.
Ooh.
And it's like, it just takes you right back to like Eddie Alvarez, Jose Aldo.
There's nothing quite like the hype around a Conor McGregor fight week.
There really isn't. And Vegas is buzzing right now.
Oh.
What I'd like to get into is the very interesting interview that Conor had with Ariel Helwani.
Oh, yeah.
That was just posted on YouTube and then clips of it on Instagram.
It's so fun to me because we don't get a ton of Conor interviews. So when it comes fight week, we're always like soaking in as much Conor content as possible, from the embeddeds to the different interviews that he does. And Ariel, best in the business, so he gets the longest format.
Yeah,
and
when Conor's ready to talk, Ariel is the go-to. And It's so funny that you say that because it is so true, right? That when we hear a lot about Conor. Conor's in the news a lot. We hear a lot of people's opinions on Conor, but we don't hear from Conor in that type of setting, at least, all that often.
And we're always reminded when we hear him why everybody loves him so much. You know,
there's nobody more articulate in the game. There's nobody that can quite frankly spin a bad situation in their favor as well as him.
He's brutally honest, whether it's positive or negative on him. He's brutally honest about how he approaches things when he messes up, when he hiccups and down his long journey of MMA. And that's why people love him. He's candid, he's real, and also has the talent to back it up.
So there was a couple of interesting things he said in that interview. The first being that he anticipates, possibly the most outlandish and hard to believe things that he said in the interview, was that he anticipates making at least $80 million US for this fight.
Crack the can to that
against Cowboy, and that he followed that up by saying that he made $50 million in the Khabib fight.
I feel like that's a bit embellished.
Yeah, I wanted to get your take on that. Do you think, obviously I agree that's a bit embellished, and the UFC I think has disclosed that the purse is $5 million. I guess that's before pay-per-view incentives and stuff like that, and I think the real number will be somewhere between 5 and 80, but maybe closer to the 5 side than the 80. I don't know. I mean, that would have to be a tremendous amount of pay-per-views that would have to be purchased for him to make anywhere close to that figure. So what do you think about that? Do you think that number's realistic?
I try to do the basic math in my head of, okay, so it's they just upped the price before this fight on ESPN Plus to 75, I think, US dollars, and everybody else, all these other countries, Australia and stuff, they have their different price points, and I don't really know what they go for over there. But you try to just base it off of like, let's just say 1 million pay-per-view buys. And I just don't know how he's able to like tell us that he's about to make $45 million or so on top of the $5 million that he's making. I just don't see how it gets split up so largely in his favor. You know, I feel like he gets. It wouldn't make sense for the UFC to give him that much of the pay-per-view points.
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't think so. So obviously you have to factor in that pay-per-view buys, and I think a lot of people don't really know this. Like, if you talk about 1 million buys, everybody thinks that that's just 1 million times the $74.99 or the $69.99 or whatever it is that they're charging,
right?
And that's what the UFC makes. So by that example, 74 times 1 million would be 74 million. The UFC is going to make 74 million in pay-per-view off this fight. That's not exactly the case. So they charge bars, restaurants, public businesses that show these fights exorbitant amounts of money to stream these fights. And I know I don't know much about the formula, but I know it has a lot to do with the capacity, whether or not they serve food and alcohol, I believe if a cover charge is going to be in place.
I've even heard the amount of TVs.
Yeah, the amount of screens, all that gets factored in. So I know that it can be $1,000 or more per location
At regular bars.
At regular bars. So places you would think like a Hooters or like a Dave & Buster's, they're paying quite a bit of money. And the UFC knows that their business is going to substantially increase that night. So they charge, these venues crazy amounts of money. So it's not, I just said all that to basically say this. It's not just the dollar figure that you see on your screen times the amount of buys.
Right.
It's that plus these crazy numbers that they're getting from these bar restaurants. So even with all that said, I think the fact or the notion that he's going to make $80 million for this one fight is a bit crazy. And that's if you're just talking about $80 million in pay-per-view money and purse, bonuses, etc. But here is where I think Conor's head might be a little bit, and I could be way off, but this is just my opinion. He's factoring in how much of a boost in sales this is going to generate for Proper 12, a company that he owns a large percentage of.
And his clothing company,
his
August
clothing,
McGregor,
exactly. If he gets a nice win, he's going to see a spike in all of these other businesses that are, Proper 12
I believe,
a major business.
Their
now.
contract is, I forget how many fights they had where they were contracted to be on the octagon, but I think they're all McGregor fights, so we'll probably see
we'll see Proper 12 on the octagon. So, and that's from the so
the $80 million makes more sense that way. Yeah,
from the straight up standpoint of Conor's going to make $80 million in payouts, bonuses, and pay-per-view incentives. I think that's a major stretch. But to say that he's not going to have an overall $80 million boost in net worth, well, then you have a whole different talking point. And I think that maybe that actually is something that could be possible.
Yeah. Now, did they, before we move on, did they say that it was going to be $5 million for this fight, or I feel like he's at least worth a guaranteed $10 million.
I saw purses floating around out there, and don't quote me, I can't remember where. I know I saw it on social media, but it was from a credible source. Otherwise, I wouldn't have paid much attention to it. But it was a disclosed purse of $5 million for Conor and $2 million for Cowboy.
Wow.
So I don't know. We need to fact check that and see if that's accurate.
Good for Cowboy. If anybody deserves it, it's Cowboy.
If anybody deserves a good 2 million bones, it's Donald Cerrone.
And then some points on the pay-per-view numbers. Cowboy's never, hasn't gotten the belt yet, and it's because he always gives himself the hardest schedule in MMA. But he got the golden egg. He got the biggest fight in all of sports right now. He got the biggest show in all of sports. Yeah. He got the McGregor fight. So, I think he sees, combat sports as more of a business instead of just like a trip to the belt. And I think he's kind of hit the jackpot.
Yeah, and good for him. He loves to put on a show. He's going to do nothing short of that this coming weekend, win or lose. And he's going to get compensated in a way that is he's never been compensated before. Cowboys made a lot of money. So yeah. I can't remember whether it was on the road to the octagon or the embedded, but in one of those two, Cowboy mentioned that he has received over $1.5 million in bonuses.
That's crazy.
So that's fight of the night, submission of the night, knockout of the night, et cetera, et cetera. So at 50 grand a pop, that's 2 per 100,000, so that's 20 per million, so 1.5. So that's
almost 30, every time he steps in the ring.
That's 30 bonuses, give or take, that Cowboy has received, and I think that he will be adding number 31 right to this the list. So
this fight's gonna live up to the hype that we thought, and I'm so glad it's happening in Nevada, not somewhere like New York where we don't know who the judges and the doctors are that always happen to interfere with fights. Nevada is known to let things go a little bit.
Yeah. If you're having a Cowboys...
if his eye's about to pop out of his skull again, they're not going to stop it. They know
just push that thing back in there.
Tell him not to blow his nose. But, it's so funny. When it's fight week with Conor McGregor, it's unlike anything else. Like, I think I'm not the biggest college football fan, so I'm not as up to date. But I think Clemson just played LSU last night.
Last night, yeah.
So I was at the gym, and I'm seeing the highlights and everything, and then one of the TVs has Conor McGregor on it, speaking to some football analysts on ESPN, and we can't hear it because they have a bunch of TVs and the volume's not on, but we're reading the subtitles, and I'm just like, what could they possibly be talking to Conor about? And, they were asking him who he likes in this game, the Clemson Tigers versus the LSU Tigers. And then what, and he was like, well, I don't really have a team. This is not really my forte. I don't really know the sport that well, but I do like Tigers. And so they were kind of talking about how, like, does your tattoo have anything to do with, like, you got this big tiger on your stomach? He's like, well, yeah, I just love how calculated a tiger is in the wild, but how ferocious they are and all this stuff. And it's so funny to me how literally it doesn't matter what the topic is. When Conor McGregor's fighting, everybody wants a piece of it, and they don't care if it's talking about the tattoo on his belly. As long as they're getting him on there, their numbers are going up, and it's just a good time for everybody.
And this is ESPN is the platform, right? ESPN is the major platform in sports, at least in the United States.
And this is his debut.
And this is the first crack that ESPN has had at the
notorious McGregor show.
Yes, at a McGregor showdown. So, of course, Conor McGregor, you might as well have asked Tom Brady who his favorite cricket player is. Asking Conor McGregor about American college football, he has no idea.
LS who?
Yeah, exactly.
What? Yeah.
And shout out to LSU. They did win last night.
Good for them. I think they're the best, right?
Oh, for sure. And their coach, just as a side note, has the deepest voice of all time.
The coolest voice. Yeah. If that guy was a fighter, he would make the scariest promos.
Oh, absolutely. That guy, I don't even know what his name is, but he is about as Louisiana as it gets.
He's about as Louisiana football coach as it gets.
That guy went straight for the crawdads after the game.
Yeah. All I know is he was that one Cajun dogging guy in Waterboy.
Yeah. But back to Conor McGregor. And speaking of Proper 12 and alcohol in general, Conor said that he has not had a drink in 3 to 4 months. Basically, the length of a little bit before the beginning of the training camp, he stopped all alcohol consumption, which great. That's not uncommon for fighters to not drink during a training camp, but I think the more eyebrow raising of a comment was that in the last training camp against Nurmagomedov, he said that he was drinking all the way up until fight week, and that he had guys from Russia in his, I guess it was in Dublin where they conducted the camp. In the training camp, they would bring them in. He would have a fight with them in the gym, not a sparring match where you're using bigger gloves and headgear and you're fighting sensibly. They would have a full-on MMA fight. Conor would win by knockout, and then he would go on essentially a 3-day bender and not show back up at the gym for another 3 days, and that was his training camp for Khabib. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's nuts. And he was saying how they would just, call these guys in, pay for them to stay in a hotel, and just tell him to stay in the hotel and call him when he's ready. And, that's a very strange way to go about fight camp. Unorthodox to say the least. But it doesn't work well for anybody to be consuming alcohol, which is, it's fine to do in moderation, but is a poison when you're trying to be a top level athlete that's cutting weight. And he was drinking at the press conferences, and then he was drinking on late night shows the week of the fight, and it's not conducive to living the martial artist lifestyle.
No, it's not. And I think it
shows his discipline. It shows that he's taking this fight more seriously. I think he's taking 2020 as a whole more seriously.
And I think if Conor's anything, it's a man of his word. And if he says, I'm taking this seriously, I'm taking a different approach, we're not just taking these sorts of things for granted. We're appreciating the opportunity. We're appreciating the challenge from a martial arts standpoint of a very worthy opponent like Donald Cerrone, and we're giving him the respect he deserves by preparing properly and getting ready to give the fans what they want to see, which is, he used the word magic. They want to see, or he wants to create magic in the octagon like he has in the past. And if you think about some of his more spectacular moments, the knockout of Jose Aldo, picking apart of Eddie Alvarez to win.
That's the best performance in MMA history, in my opinion.
Just picked him apart to
30 minutes with Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, he's created real magic. And I said it right away in the Khabib fight. He wasn't himself. Mm-hmm. That was the Conor McGregor that fought Eddie Alvarez would have destroyed the Conor McGregor that fought Khabib. And he was walking into range with his hands down. He was, looking. Obviously, Khabib won the grappling exchanges, which we expected. What I didn't expect was for him to just be so kind of lackluster in performance when it came to striking.
Right.
And I think he really had a deep look into himself, not necessarily right after that fight because the antics kind of continued, but shortly thereafter when he said, okay, this is not about money at this point anymore. This is not about fame. I already have that. This is about what type of impression do I want to leave on the world? What sort of example do I want to show my children for how to conduct, because he's a father of two now,
right? For
how to conduct themselves in the public eye and to show people that I can be graceful and decent as a human being with money. And I think he's taking this very seriously. And I think John Kavanaugh, at the end of the day, is not a BSer. John Kavanaugh tells it like it is.
Yeah.
And John Kavanaugh has expressed concern in the past, and he's been happy in the past.
He's even gone as far to say, like, Conor's got all the money in the world. If he's not truly as hungry as he was back in the day, then
what are we doing this for?
Yeah, then why? You've got all this money and you've got all this fame. You can go do a million different things, and you already are doing some of them that don't involve getting punched in the face. But it takes that hunger and that drive to put yourself through a 12-week camp or an 8-week camp and go fight another man in a cage.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about Conor is I think he truly is hungry again to compete and is willing to put himself all on the line like he has done when he was a broke man.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it.
And what I was also saying about John Kavanaugh was he said that he believes this is the best Conor McGregor that he's ever seen.
Yeah.
So,
and I believe skill-wise that's probably the case, and weight cut it would probably still be the case, but the fact that they aren't cutting weight just makes this all the better. I think those two guys, if it was up to them, they would tell everybody not to cut weight, and they would just live where they're at. They don't want to try to beat the system, but if everybody's doing it, you kind of have to do it.
fall in line, sort of.
Yeah.
And speaking of not cutting weight in this fight being at 170, Conor said he likes the landscape of the 170 division, and he has gone as far as to say he likes Kamaru, Colby as potential opponents.
And George.
Now, obviously George, and everybody kind of saw that might be a fun fight, but what do you think about Conor potentially fighting Kamaru Usman for the 170 title? I mean, I know there's some things that need to happen and fall in place for that to even be discussed, but does that seem far-fetched to you?
Yeah, I think it's a little far-fetched just because, Conor in the Helwani conversation was saying how he's currently underweight for 170.
Right.
I can assure you
something, I think is exactly what he said.
Yeah, 160 something. And I can assure you Kamaru Usman isn't living under 170 right now.
He hasn't seen 170 since the weigh-in.
Yeah, he hasn't seen sub 170 in a long time. And I think, he's naturally living around 200 pounds, maybe a little more. And he's a wrestling monster that doesn't get pulled. What we love about Cowboy is he said, win or lose, I'm here to put on a good show for the people. I'm not going to try to wrestle and just make this a boring fight. Not that Kamaru's style is boring, but Kamaru's not going to go, hey, I'll go strike with Conor McGregor because, I mean, he's got a big chin and he's got he knows how to strike himself, but Conor's one of the best strikers in the league in MMA. So why not put that amazing wrestling, on Conor McGregor if he does happen to fight Usman, which I think he would. And I think, in my humble opinion, which doesn't mean much, but personally, I think he would ragdoll somebody like Khabib. I think he would ragdoll the Tony Fergusons. Usman, yeah. I think he's a nightmare for everybody from Khabib Nurmagomedov to Israel Adesanya. I don't think. Yeah. I think I agree. You find his toughest opponents being somebody like John Jones because he's just a little undersized.
John Jones, wow, that
big of a difference.
Big of a difference. Wow.
I think he's arguably one of the most dominant performers in all of MMA right now. I mean,
yeah, you won't get any argument from me there. Because Usman is the real deal.
And styles make matchups. And being the champion, he's going to be fighting champions. And I think, he can't make 55, but if he did, he would, I think, kind of mollywop the 55ers. And I also think that besides like a Yoel Romero at 85, nobody's going to stop. Nobody's going to call out Usman. Yeah.
No, nor should they.
I
mean, I want to see the George fight. I think that's fun.
Yeah, I think St. Pierre's training for a big fight this year, and that'll probably happen. Yeah. If I could see the two main fights money wise that Conor wants is Masvidal and St. Pierre or the Khabib rematch, but.
If I'm Conor, I set my sights on that. I set my sights on George because that's a decent matchup. I won't say good matchup. I won't go that far, but that's a decent matchup for Conor. It's also a big money fight, and should he be able to get past Cowboy and George, then I would set my sights on the 55 title, and then finish it off with a big showdown with Nate Diaz
or George St. Pierre.
Yeah, or George St. Pierre. I would do Nate, honestly, because I think that's just as big as George, and I think George has just got a nightmare skill set for Conor, whereas Nate kind of plays.
Well, and the
more
story's
into his
untold.
favor.
The story's unfinished with Nate.
As far as I'm concerned, Nate's got the upper hand. Nate finished Conor. Conor won on a majority decision.
Right, and there's more than one way to win and lose fights in MMA, but everybody knows there's levels of victory, and decisions aren't quite as high as finishes.
No.
So
you don't get the name Conor McTapout if you lost on points.
That's right.
Floyd Money.
We all know Mr. Quitter. But
so here's another weird thing that I saw on Ariel's Instagram feed, and I wanted to get your take on it. Was Showtime Pettis has apparently filed a lawsuit against USADA.
Oh, I saw that, yeah.
Because he believes that there was some wrongdoing in the way they administered a test for him pre-fight with Nate Diaz, which ultimately caused him to cut his hand on the glass and
on the piss container.
The container for the sample. It's a very bizarre story. It's still kind of unfolding. It was the first I had ever heard of it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I find that really strange, and USADA does everything they can to kind of make it life easy on these fighters, but they have a job to do, and sometimes if the sample that they get doesn't come in the way they need it, they just need more, and so I understand why they would do that, but on the other hand, like if he's about to step into the octagon, it's not like he's going to be cheating any time between then and when you could test him immediately after. Like, if he peed for you right before he wrapped his hands and everything like that, I don't see the urgency in testing him again right before he steps in the octagon. That could actually, in this case, it actually screwed with his pre-fight warm-up by cutting his hand and everything.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I can tell you just from like a strict legal standpoint, when you file a lawsuit against somebody, I mean, basically anybody can sue anybody for anything. That doesn't mean you're going to win.
Right.
And USADA is a tough opponent to go up against.
Yeah.
But Showtime does have the money to hire good lawyers and do his thing. But when you sue somebody, you have to demonstrate what's called damages. You have to show how you were damaged in the situation and how that damage caused you to lose money or whatever, possessions or whatever. You have to show that you were damaged in such a way that you need to be compensated for. So Duke or Showtime said that Duke Rufus wanted to call the fight. He prior to the walkout, he said, "Your hand is cut. I don't want you fighting tonight." And Showtime said, "No, I'm going to do it anyways. I'm here. I've had a great camp, and I feel fine. It's just my hand. I want to fight." So I think looking back, he'll realize that kind of didn't play in his favor, because when you talk about damages, he's making a 6-figure payday, potential 7-figure. And if he wasn't able to make the walk, and then he could make a claim that USADA had some wrongdoing by letting him handle his test, which he said they were not supposed to allow him to do, which ultimately led to his hand being cut, which ultimately led to him having to pull out of the fight. I think there's some demonstrated damages there. But when you show that he says, no, I'm fine, I then go out and compete, I do very well, other than the fact that I just happened to be in there with Nate Diaz, Right. But it wasn't, you didn't watch that fight and say, something's going wrong with Showtime's hand.
Right.
So I'm not sure where and how Showtime's going to be able to demonstrate this significant damage to get compensated the amount of money that makes this whole endeavor worth the time and effort. But then again, who knows with a lawsuit? It's always a crapshoot. But That's unfortunate that happened to him. And USADA is the best in the business, and so we have to give them some credit sometimes. But they're also not a perfect system.
Right.
And
they're just as close to perfect as we've gotten so far.
Yeah. And the thing that people have to remember, too, is MMA is just such a young sport when you compare it to other sports like basketball, football, and so those programs largely have their standards buttoned up a little bit better. Like everybody who's a fan of MMA right now is part of this, is along for the ride.
The progress,
the learning curve.
Progress,
they're witnessing it. So, USADA, they definitely shouldn't have done something that was procedurally incorrect.
Right.
And if it caused Showtime to have a hindered performance, then they should have to compensate him in some way. But I just don't see how it hindered his performance. It just looked like Nate Diaz hindered his performance more than the glass on the piss cup.
Yeah, and he's as tough as they come. I mean, you don't get on the Wheaties box as an MMA fighter for not being one of the best and one of the toughest, especially these most recent fights where he's just putting it all on the line and kind of giving the fans exactly what they want to see. But it could have been just a mental thing that kind of messed with him, or not even the injury messed with him, but the principle pissed him off and kind of took him out of the headspace that he needed to be in for the fight. So that, I don't know how if you put like a monetary value on that, but there's definitely something there that might have affected him, and I'm sure there's attorneys all over the place that could figure out how to get him compensated. But it's just one of those. MMA is full of freak accidents and tricky situations. In every fight, I mean, there's really almost no clean fight announcement to fight,
execution,
outcome in
without
MMA.
some controversy of some kind
Somewhere along the way.
Well, having fought before, that when you're backstage, you're warming up, you're with your team, it's a very kind of personal, exclusive moment, and you've got somebody coming in to make you piss in a cup, and then, oh, by the way, we didn't get the right, or you were too overhydrated the first time, so we need you to do it again, and you're in the middle of your process, and we know how superstitious a lot of fighters are sometimes. They have certain procedures that they follow every time, and so I could see that messing with your head, but then getting a judge and a jury of your peers to feel sorry for you as the millionaire athlete that you are is tough sometimes.
For sure. We covered a lot of MMA, especially all the hot stuff from the McGregor build-up and fight and all that stuff.
Well, McGregor's like a gravitational force. Yeah. So when he's in the media, when it's a McGregor fight week, there's tons of news regarding Conor McGregor,
right?
Not so much anything else,
right.
So
and not that this card is the worst we've ever seen, but there's not a ton of depth on this fight card, and I understand why. They only have so many big names in the UFC, and they gotta Conor McGregor doesn't need any help, especially when he's facing Cowboy Cerrone.
Yeah,
those two guys are some of the biggest names in the sport, and you put them at the top of the bill. You could put anybody under.
You could literally have a Las Vegas amateur MMA showdown for the co-main event, and it would not make a difference.
You could have the Bare Knuckle Fight League fight the undercard.
Watch out. They're
Artem Lobov and Paulie Malignaggi.
Yeah, I think the CEO said that did like 37 billion pay-per-view buys or something.
More like 37,000. I think it's slightly above Tito Ortiz versus Chuck Liddell, hosted by Oscar De La Hoya.
God, I forgot that happened. What a time to be alive.
And not that we were going to talk about that at all, but how fucking accurate was Dana White saying that was a one-time only cash grab, just that Oscar De La Hoya did trying to show that he could do MMA.
I think that was more of like an attempt to try to scare Dana White. It's like, you want to do Zuffa boxing, I'll do De La Hoya, our golden boy MMA, and it totally backfired on him. I mean, what a terrible choice of a main event. Yeah. Then Tito getting on the mic and saying, if you want to really get paid as a fighter, then sign with Golden Boy MMA, and then he takes another fight
with a different
promotion. Yeah, just the whole thing from the jump was a disaster. And it listen, if Dana White wants to get into the boxing world, he's gonna be able to succeed and get to the highest of levels.
Working
Golden
with
Boy is still the pinnacle of boxing. So if you're gonna try to, not the pinnacle, let me rephrase that. Golden Boy is one of the top promotions in boxing.
Right.
So if you are that successful in one lane and you're considering a different avenue as an addition to your business model, make sure you have that buttoned up, because that diminishes your brand. It's like if Disney opened a half-ass theme park in the middle of Kansas somewhere, and it was like, oh, we're just gonna try this new concept here. Well, it diminishes the whole brand if it's a monumental failure. Yeah. So this is why Dana has been very calculated with Zuffa boxing.
Right.
He's not kind of fallen into this De La Hoya trap that, okay, he struck first, so now I gotta
retaliate.
He's doing it in the proper way, and when and if he does a boxing event, it'll be much better than the disaster that was Ortiz versus Liddell 26.
Yeah. And that was a shit show. And then Tito goes on to defend his UFC title against a WWF title from two guys that don't fight in either organization anymore. And I think the last time that guy fought, he wore one of those Nacho Libre wrestling faces. So that's really a disaster. And
speaking of titles on the line, there is a very interesting title on the line, and it is the Ring Magazine title for the best boxer in the heavyweight division. Ring Magazine has made it known that the winner of the contest between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, the rematch, will be crowned Ring Magazine champion.
As they should be.
I know a lot of boxers, and there's a lot of belts and a lot of confusion. But if there is one belt where there really is no confusion, and whoever is the holder of that is the top dog, it's the Ring Magazine belt.
True.
It hasn't been contested in the heavyweight division for quite some time. It's being put up for this fight. The winner of this fight is going to be undoubtedly the top dog in the heavyweight division, and a great time, quite frankly, for heavyweight boxing. Couple things at the press conference that I watched that I wanted to get your take on.
Yeah.
See what you agree with. So obviously when you do a rematch and you have a fight that was that close and that controversial, each fighter has to sort of sell their angle of why it's going to be different, and they're going to be the one that edges this out this time around. So for Fury, his angle is Deontay caught me 12 months after the worst depression, drug addiction, alcoholism of my life, serious obesity, and I'm only a year or less removed from that, and I still outworked you. Now I'm 3 years removed from that, and I'm really going to destroy you. That's Fury's take. Mm-hmm. Wilder's take is, look what I did against Stavern. I went the distance with him, one of the only times I've ever gone to the distance in a fight, besides the Fury fight. And then when the rematch, I came back and just mollywopped him right off the bat. And so essentially he said to Tyson, I've got your number. I do better in rematches. I've already calculated your data, and this time I'm just going to mop the floor with you.
Right.
So which of those two stories are you buying and which are you selling?
It's hard to say I can pick one side or the other because you have to take both of these guys for their word. I think Tyson Fury, in my opinion, is the most skillful boxer in the heavyweight division we've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
But Wilder has this crazy power that it only takes one shot for him, and he has shown us that he can throw that shot late into the 12th round and still get the job done. It's really hard for me to say who I think is, has the competitive edge in this fight. I think mind games wise, Fury's really good at playing that role and kind of trying to get people out of their head. But Deontay Wilder's a really mentally strong guy, and sometimes it looks like he's getting flustered and frustrated with the head games and stuff like that. But when he steps in the ring, it doesn't really seem to affect him that much. I think I think Tyson Fury is spot on when he says he's able to cover more ground skillfully and boxing wise than Wilder, because he's 3 years removed from that horrible bender that he was on, and they said Deontay looked at him changing camps as a bad thing. I think he just is evolving as a fighter. We forget how young Tyson Fury is. Yeah. I think he's barely 30. Maybe he's still under 30.
He's 31.
31.
Yeah.
Okay. So, he's still a very young fighter, especially for the heavyweight division. And I think, he had his camp set for a while, and then he went completely out of boxing. And then he got back with this 25-year-old young coach who, did great for him. But there's more information to learn, and a 25-year-old coach just doesn't have all the answers.
You're also not going to be able to contest if you get in sort of an argumentative I'm the coach, you're the student type of situation when you're one of the highest paid heavyweight boxers on the planet,
right?
And your coach is 6 years your junior at 25 years old. No matter how good he is or how he's groomed you and brought you up to where you are now, it's going to be very difficult for him to say to you sort of how John Kavanaugh can say to Conor or Freddie Roach can say to Manny Pacquiao, no, you need to listen to me.
Trust me, my experience.
You're experienced, you're elder. It's just, if you see somebody in public that corrects you and they're 5 years younger than you, you're going to be like, what the heck is wrong with you?
Yeah, you don't know.
But if somebody's grandfather politely gives you some constructive criticism, you're going to be much less likely to be argumentative and more likely to probably listen to it and take it. I think I side a little bit more with Fury on this angle for promoting the rematch. I think that Fury, yes, he has had a chance to really get himself back on his feet. He is going to look better than he did the first time. Deontay, I don't think, has gotten any more powerful since he fought Fury the first time. He's extraordinarily powerful, but I think his power, for all intents and purposes, has stayed the same.
Right.
Fury took his best shots, and Fury got up from them.
Right.
Wilder was substantially outboxed, besides those two knockdowns, by Fury the entire match. And now Fury is an even more polished and improved boxer than he was at that time. So I don't see, just from a preliminary assessment of this fight, how Wilder is going to be able to do anything differently to Fury that he didn't do the first time, which is put his hardest shot on him, and it didn't stop Fury.
Right. Yeah.
So that's, if I'm Wilder's camp, I don't know. I'm a little concerned that how do we tackle this? We hit this guy with the kitchen sink, and he got back up. And then aside from that, oh, by the way, he beat us every second of the fight.
And
it wasn't those 2 seconds.
Including the round that he got
Yep.
those knockdowns in.
If there wasn't a 10-8 rule for knockdowns, then
We
it could have just been 10-9. Yeah, it could have just been
like
10-9 rounds for
Yeah.
Fury. Or, I mean, if you count, let's
2
say you split it
rounds.
in 3 minutes, like each round is split in 3 minute or 1 minute increments. So the first 1 minute is scored, the second 1 minute is scored, and the third 1 minute is scored.
He won 2/3.
He won 2/3 of every
Right.
round. So obviously it's not done that way. I'm just using that as an example. But that said, Wilder only won about 15 seconds of that fight.
Right. And his boxing skill, I mean, we watched him fight tougher competition since the rematch than Fury did. And that's not much up for debate, but that's just what happened. And, we have to commend him for taking an Ortiz fight, Luis Ortiz,
Yeah.
right? Which is literally a nightmare for anybody. And he put him down. He's a little older, but still a nightmare for anybody in the heavyweight division. But I also think that he showed that Ortiz was outboxing him in that fight, and it took one shot. And Ortiz, I just don't think he has the boxing skill and the defensive skill that Fury has to be aware of when those hard shots are coming. I mean, we have to remember Fury took it took 12 rounds pretty much for Deontay Wilder to knock Fury to the canvas cold.
Yep.
And now Fury's very aware of that punch. And
Yep.
he's a better defensive fighter, and he's a better striker now, and he's really good at moving. And you watch him move, and I think he's gonna know exactly when those shots are coming. And Wilder's pace is very slow.
Yeah.
He'll lose rounds just to get that one shot, but I think Fury's gonna play into that and start to take rounds slowly but surely with a slow pace coming at him, and he's going to pick him apart and score and score and score and move, and then it's going to be too little too late by the time Wilder does turn it up and start to try to land the finishing blow.
One interesting thing that Fury said is, and I agree with him on this in MMA and in boxing largely, is that whenever you look at a matchup and you see a guy like Deontay Wilder, he's a knockout expert, and Fury, he is just an absolute brilliant boxer. So the whole notion is if Fury's going to win, he's going to have to outpoint him, and if Wilder's going to win, he's going to have to knock him out.
There's the only two ways.
Usually
about it,
the result is the inverse of one of those two things.
Right.
Now, I don't think that under any set of circumstances that Wilder's going to be outboxing Tyson Fury. But if Fury does come on with that crazy pace and he is able to hurt Wilder, and Wilder's starting slow and then he gets flustered, and so then he starts to take some chances with some big shots,
he'll compromise position.
Yes, I don't think we could necessarily write it off that we won't see Deontay Wilder on the ground in this fight.
Yeah, let's not forget Fury has a ton of knockouts, and anybody at 6'9", 250 some pounds is going to have knockout power.
Yeah.
So if he flashes, knockdowns or just flusters Wilder enough, I think he can come on with an onslaught that might get stopped by the refs.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think if it does get stopped, if Fury's the one that gets the stop, it'll be a hailstorm of shots,
right?
And Wilder's covered up at that point, and the ref just steps in.
Right.
I don't think that Fury's style will really lend to him catching Wilder with a really brutal one-shot knockout. I think it'll be an onslaught, a barrage, if you will, of shots. But that's an interesting one. The press conference was cool. It's kind of setting up things to come. That's the next big fight that everybody's looking forward to after this McGregor and Cerrone fight.
And one thing that's similar between those two fights is Cowboy and Conor haven't had to do that much selling of the fight because everybody's already going to tune in. You got my money when you announced the fight.
Yep.
The performance that Fury and Wilder put on in the first fight has solidified them not having to
Yep.
put a bunch of, pre-fight antics out there and hype this thing up. What we saw the first time was so damn good that everybody's willing to see another 12 rounds of that. And we don't care what you guys say before the fight. We just want to see the damn thing happen.
Any cool thing that Fury says is just icing on the cake.
Exactly.
At that point.
Yeah, and if you like the Terminator scary version that Deontay Wilder always brings to the press conferences, then you'll be able to catch some glimpses of that. But all in all, we're blessed as fight fans because we got a ton of good stuff to look forward to in the early parts of 2020.
Yes, we do. Guys, that wraps it up for another episode of the Barnhill Brothers. Thank you, as always, for listening.
Yeah.
I'm Steven. This is my brother, Nick.
Yep.
Check us out every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, guys. Dropping fire.
Yes, we're going to definitely recap that Cowboy Conor fight, so enjoy the show. And one last thing is, buy the thing on ESPN Plus if you want to, but if you have buffering problems or anything like that, make sure there's a Dave & Buster's or a Hooters or somewhere nearby that you can jet to real quick because you don't want to miss a second of that fight.
Whatever floats your boat. If you want to play some video games and
then go to Hooters.
Have
if you
it
want
family
to see some titties, go to Dave & Buster's.
Oh, guys, one more thing. We are going to be doing a Friday show. Not this week, but we're setting it up for next week or the week after. We're going to not talk too much about what it's going to entail, but it's going to be something fun. It's going to be unlike this show that we currently are doing, but it will still be combat sports related. So look out for that. More announcements to come on that, guys. And if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure... Did I just say podcast?
Yeah, it's a podcast, but it's a podcast, and
it's a podcast and a YouTube video.
And what we're gonna do, I don't know if we did this last week, but since we're on it, all right. What round? What winner? Cowboy Conor.
Conor McGregor by stoppage in the 4th round.
Ooh, okay. I'm going Conor McGregor 2nd round KO.
Cool. All right, guys. Peace. Have a good week.